In this module, we will cover the different GraphDB distributions and how to install GraphDB. Let's get started. GraphDB comes into 3 different distributions. All distributions include the platform-independent GraphDB database engine, the Web Workbench web interface, and a pre-configured web server to access the database. The GraphDB native desktop application is an OS-specific distribution, which includes a compatible Java version and user interface to stop the application. Since it is optimized for desktop use, it is limited to GraphDB Free Edition only. The GraphDB Standalone Server is a standard Java application distribution. It requires a locally installed Java version. All start-stop scripts are using a command line interface. All additions are available through this distribution. The GraphDB Docker image requires a local Docker engine to stop the database. This is the preferred option also to run GraphDB in Kubernetes environments. The easiest way to set up and run GraphDB is to use the native desktop installations provided for the GraphDB Free Edition. This kind of installation does not require the use of a console, as it works in a graphic user interface. After you request your GraphDB copy, you will receive an email with the download link. According to your operating system, proceed as follows. On Windows, download the GraphDB exe file. Start the application file and follow the installer prompts. Start the application using the desktop icon. On Mac OS, download the DMG file. Open it to get a virtual disk on your desktop, and copy the program from the virtual disk to your hard disk's applications folder. Start the database using the application icon. On Linux, download the GraphDB RPM or DEB file. Use the appropriate terminal command or, alternatively, double-click the package file. Start the database using the application icon. Now that GraphDB is started, you can configure it by clicking on the Settings button. Here you can change things like the default port or add custom Java properties. Once you have your GraphDB configured, you can click on the Open GraphDB button to open the Workbench. Or, if you need help with your GraphDB, click on the Documentation button. The default way of running GraphDB is as a standalone server. The server is platform independent and includes all recommended Java virtual machine parameters for immediate use. Please note that running the GraphDB standalone server requires you to have a Java development kit or a Java runtime environment installed on your machine. To install GraphDB as a standalone server, first download and unzip the distribution file. Then execute the GraphDB startup script located in the bin directory. Once the script is done starting GraphDB, open your browser and head to http://localhost:7200 to access the Workbench. For more help configuring the GraphDB standalone server, check the GraphDB online documentation. The third way of running GraphDB is in a Docker container. Ontotext provides already built Docker images for GraphDB Standard Edition and Enterprise Edition on the public GraphDB Docker Hub registry. Note that to use those images, you must have a valid license for the imaged product. To use GraphDB free in a Docker container, you will need to build your own image. For help with that or Docker Compose, please refer to the official GraphDB Docker GitHub repository. The first step of turning GraphDB in a Docker container is to pull a Docker image. All GraphDB Docker images have a tag consisting of the version followed by the edition. In this example, we are going to use the 9.10.1 version of the Standard Edition, but if you have a license for Enterprise Edition, feel free to swap the SE symbol for EE symbol. Use the Docker pull command for the required image. Now that we have the image, we need to run it in a container. For that use, the Docker run command publishing the port GraphDB would use localhost 7200 by default, giving the container a name, and pointing it to the image we just pulled. To pass custom options to the GraphDB startup script, just add them to the end of the run command. For example, we can specify the amount of memory for the global cache to 2 GB. Once the container is up and running GraphDB, open your browser and head to localhost 7200 to access the Workbench. Something we have to keep in mind with Docker images is that they do not persist data through restarts, which isn't ideal for a database. There are ways to circumvent that, and today we are going to use Docker volumes. The first type of Docker volume is managed by Docker. It works by writing the database files to a disk on the host system using the internal volume manager. The second type is managed by the user. It's done by creating a data directory on the host system, outside the container, and mounting this to a directory, visible from inside the container. We encourage the user to familiarize themselves in more detail with the options available, but for now, we are going to use the latter option. To do that, first create a data directory on a suitable volume on your host system. For example, /my/own/GraphDB home. Now start the GraphDB Docker container, mounting the directory we created to the Docker's GraphDB home directory. To do that, add the -v option to the Docker run command, pointing the host directory to GraphDB's home directory. Using the -v option, you can provide also a path to the license file. More information on managing the GraphDB Docker container can be found on GraphDB Docker's hub page. For the next step in the installation process, we want to create a new repository. Open the GraphDB Workbench. Once the Workbench is ready, select Setup from the tabs on the left of the screen, followed by a click on Repositories button. Now we can start creating the new repository. Select Create a new repository. First, we have to select the repository type from the list. And once done with configuring it, press Create. Our repository is now created. To use our new repository, press the Connect button. And if you want to set it as the default repository, use the pin. Finally, for the last step, we want to test the repository. To perform the test, first, select Sparkle from the menu on the left of the screen. Next, we can use the query editor to write and execute Sparkle queries. In our example shown on the bottom left, we wrote a query to insert data about the Flintstones. And we also want to test the repository by writing a query that selects information. An example is shown on the bottom right, where we wrote a query list to Fred Flintstone's grandchildren. When our executed queries return the expected and correct results, we know that our GraphDB installation is successful.